Hi, I'm Wayne Tuttle, and welcome to Chasing Legends. Welcome back to Chasing Legends. Please hit our subscribe button, hit the notifications bell, leave a comment if you want to leave a comment. We do answer our comments ourselves. Go to our website, www.legendofsuperstitionmountains.com. Shirts, coffee cups, hats, the bark notes, all kinds of cool stuff there. We will get right into the story because that's what you're here for, right? Not the beginning. So this story is referred to as the baking soda treasure or the Clevenger treasure. This goes back into 1886, May of 1886. A man named Samuel Clevenger lives in Safford, Arizona, with his wife Charlotte and his daughter Jessie. And he sells his cattle ranch and all his cattle, and he decides he's going to move to Oregon. So after the sale, he gathers everything together. He hires on two cowboys, a man named Johnson and a man named Wilson, and they're going to move this group of horses, this herd of horses, up through Arizona, up into Utah, down into the southern end of Idaho, and up into Oregon. And this is the plan. So they get going and everything goes pretty well. One of the things, and the reason the title of the story is Charlotte, each evening they set camp. When no one's paying attention, she's getting firewood. She takes a box that has baking soda cans in it, and they're full of all the coinage and bills from the sale of the ranch and the cattle, herd of cattle. So she takes this out and conceals it or buries it somewhere near camp, and then each morning, when she's preparing breakfast, when everyone's first getting up, she retrieves it and puts it back in the wagon. This goes on. They get to Lee's Ferry. They cross Lee's Ferry. Shortly after crossing Lee's Ferry, they're probably, they guess, about 5 miles from the border of Utah. They decide they're not going to make it. They need to kind of stop for the night. They stop, they herd up the horses, get everything set up, set camp, and she goes off. Charlotte goes off, hides the box, comes back in, makes everybody dinner. Well, nobody suspects anything that we know of, and everything's good. Next morning they get up. Charlotte and Jessie are making breakfast. Samuel Clevenger is sitting there beside the fire. And then suddenly one of the cowboys comes up, cursing and yelling at the old man, and swings an axe and buries it into his skull. The women completely have no idea why this is happening, what's going on, and they take off in two different directions and flee. The two men chase after the women. They catch Charlotte, who can't move very fast. They bring her down. She tries to fight back, but after several swings of the axe, she's dead as well. The men don't know where Jessie went off to. They kind of cursory look around, and then they just decide to go back to the wagon. They tear apart the wagon, can't find what they're looking for. So they go back out and they start looking for Jessie. They find Jessie. I guess she wasn't hidden that well. They drag her back to camp, take a horse's bridle. They start whipping her with it and torturing her. But they realize after a while she has no idea where the box is really hidden. So they start to pack everything up. They push the wagon off to the side of the trail, and they take all the supplies that they're not going to need. They burn everything. They dig two shallow graves, placing Samuel and Charlotte in the shallow graves, and they make their way and head off. And they continue to go north. They figure it's going to be a week or two before someone catches up to their trail, and they'll have to wait and see if anybody comes looking for them. Well, it's almost 3 months before someone coming through stumbles upon the burned out wreckage of the wagon and the supplies. So individual sees all this, starts looking around the area thinking it was an Indian attack, and then he comes upon the shallow graves, finds a stalking leg of a woman sticking out of the ground where the coyotes had been digging at the shallow graves. He reports to the sheriff, Sheriff Mulvannon, down in Prescott. His name's William Bully Mulvannon. He brings two deputies up, Francis and Odell, and they come up to investigate the scene. They exhume the bodies. They realize they're both killed with an axe blow to the head. They realize this is more a case of murder than anything to do with the Indians. And the Indians wouldn't have burned all these supplies and stuff. They would have tried to take as much of it. So they put feelers out to sea because they have no identification, no idea who these people could be. Finally, Lee's Ferry and a couple places, there was a man and a woman with a teenage girl with 2 cowboys, one black, one white, that had come through. They realized this must be the group at the head of horses. They return to the area and start, the sheriff begins tracking them north out up into Utah, looking to see where they're at. As they go, they're able to kind of go to town and ask ranchers along the way, did you see a group, 2 men, black and white man, with a teenage girl with about 100 head of horses? It appears they're selling the horses off as they go. So they'd sell, 5 horses to this rancher, 5 to that. So they're going along, they're making a little money at this. They get up into the northern end of Utah, up almost into Idaho, and they finally get word that there was a sizable herd of horses sold. It was from a black and a white man, and with a teenage girl with them. They figure, we got our guys. They go up there, and they're talking and trying to see what information they can get, still knowing it's a long shot because they've scattered since then. And they're told at that time that the one man, the white man, is with the teenage girl living in an abandoned ranch nearby. So they just travel over to there. Well, at this point, that man's name is Wilson. Wilson figures they're free and clear. Nothing. The riders come riding up. He's like, hey, how you doing? They catch them. They arrest them. Start sending them back to Arizona. Well, further word between Wilson and some other people, they find the other gentlemen's across the border in Montana. So they go over, they arrest Johnson, put him in shackles, and bring him back. They bring both men back. Both men are trying to deny it or blame it on the other. Jesse's story is it was all Johnson did everything and Wilson just protected her the whole time. They also discover that Jesse is now pregnant with Wilson's child. Additionally, they're told that Wilson actually gave $200 of his money to Johnson to purchase Jesse so that he could take Jesse with him. There's a lot of division in the town over the story. They generally believe Jesse, but they're not quite sure. The jury's kind of hung up, so they just convict both men. Both men have told a story that the other did it, he did it, and they don't, rather than sort it out, justice at that time is, you were both there, you're done for. So they're both going to be hung or hanged, however you want to do the vernacular in English. And they request, a couple days before their sentence is going to be carried out, a deck of playing cards. And in their cell, and they were good cellmates. They said they got along fine even after everything went down. They played a hand of 7-up, and Wilson lost, and then Wilson called for his attorney, and they did a full written confession and said that Johnson really had nothing to do with it. He just tried to, buy Johnson off and so forth. Johnson had come into the group, blah, blah, blah. Johnson told the same story, and that's the end of it. They decide they will, the death sentence is given to Wilson, and Johnson gets off with not a very easy sentence. He has a lifetime imprisonment sentence for his doing. Jesse, meanwhile, is put in with a foster family in Prescott. Shortly thereafter, she meets a Texas cattle rancher and moves to Texas. It's very interesting because there's a lot of details in the story. If you look for multiple different versions of the story, you'll find there's a lot of details of who was there and who was where and what and not, and with these 2 gentlemen. Wilson is put to death. Johnson actually is released 20 years later and then decides just to live in Prescott. But he never tells anybody anything about the story. He does not talk about the story. He keeps his mouth shut, never has anything else to say about what happened. Now, Jessie, however, she returns 5 years later with her husband and goes up to search. Now, the sheriff did a very thorough search of the area. They never found anything, the box with the cans in it. Jessie, when she returns, says that she was with her mother that night they buried it. She doesn't know which really direction, but she said they went outside of camp. Her mother would not always bury it, but sometimes would just conceal it in a hole or someplace and just cover it over temporarily till the next day. She said her mother never told anybody exactly where it was. She said that evening, because the idea was she was with her mother's going to conceal it. Jessie walks back to make sure nobody saw anything of what they're doing. Jessie and her husband, again, are never able to discover anything. The area is known as Dead Man's Hollow. It's up by House Rock. So it's a very, very interesting story because it has too many people's names. We know the deputies, the sheriff involved. We know there was the conviction and the release of Johnson. They don't always give Jesse's married name for a later date. And there's also a lot of people believe that Jesse had a lot more to do with it, Wilson. She was trying to protect Wilson because it was their scheme. Johnson was probably the innocent man in all this, and that it just didn't turn out right. And when Wilson realized one of them was going to die, just told Johnson, let's just gamble away, and he was the loser in the gamble of whose life would happen. Now, a number of years later, other treasure hunters went up there, and it was said in the 40s and 50s, 1940s and 50s, that people would take shots at people out there in the area. One man did say after there was no evidence really left of anything out there, he was able to metal detect and find a dagger and several other objects, and said he kind of pinpointed about where the wagons and stuff had been burned. Now, what distance and where that was from the camp, it's hard to say. 5 miles from the Utah border, about 5 hours, 4 or 5 hours from Lee's Ferry. There's a general, and along State Route 89A out near House Rock Valley. So that's the area it's believed to be in. The treasure is still to this date. I can find no information on anyone ever recovering anything. And Jesse said in the end, where originally it was always the baking soda cans, Jesse said, no, it was a box with baking soda cans in it, several, and they all had the different amounts. Again, Samuel Clevenger was found with $450 on him. The two cowboys split that between them, and Wilson basically, after they sold the horses and had that, he gave Johnson $200 for Jesse. So that was part of their deal. Nothing's ever said of Jesse's child or what became of the child or anything after that. It's not spoken of, so I don't really know anything to do with that. But a very interesting story there. So if you're ever up in that area going along the highway and you just kind of like, for some reason, get a kind of an inkling somewhere along there. I mean, let's face it, they sold the head of horses, 100 head of horses, even though it was far less than that. Probably horses were $10 a head or so. So they probably made another 1,000, but they were found not with that much money. So who knows where all the money went, since they had the split of the other. So they each had to have about $700-800. But the rest of that money, that $2,000, excuse me, the $2,000 have to be worth between $20,000 and $50,000 now in coinage, gold and silver coinage and so forth, dating from that era. Now, the incident did take place in 1886, and the trial took place in 1887, if that helps anybody. So I encourage someone, let's see if someone can get up there and dig up that box and get that treasure. So that's 2 boxes of treasure we have, one along Queen Creek and another one now up in northern Arizona. So hope you enjoyed that story. I mean, we're kind of moving around Arizona and find some really interesting ones. And this was, again, another one that, as I looked at it, I kept looking for more references and resources. And the more resources I had, and actually names and dates, I felt it was more of a verifiable treasure story, not just something of urban legend. So I wanted to share that. So I hope everybody had a great weekend. Hope everybody has a lovely week. Remember, this Friday is the Treasure Hunt of the Year Awards on the Ides of March. And we will be gathering at the Mammoth Saloon to celebrate our Treasure Hunter of the Year and our runner-up, her special recognition awards. So we will be posting that so everybody can see who won the awards, and all the camaraderie and the feasting and whatnot happens that. It's a Friday night, so I'm sure there might be a few drunk people there too. So there you go. Hope everybody enjoys everything. Everybody has a great week. And before we leave, you got to remember there's one thing, the most important thing of all, right? And you know it. You can say it with me. I'm Wayne Tuttle. You're not. And this was Chasing Legends.